My guest today is Carl Nicpon with Marsh Creek Advisors, an M&A advisory firm that helps business owners think through what their business is really worth, how to increase that value, and how to navigate a sale without leaving money on the table. Carl's story is pretty unique. He's a third-generation business owner who helped run his family's wedding services company before selling it in a private equity roll-up. Before all of that, he spent 7 years in schools as a counselor and administrator, which sounds unrelated until you hear him talk about how emotional a business sale actually is. We also get into the part of selling a business nobody talks about on LinkedIn, trying to run the company and prep it for sale at the same time. You still have to hit your numbers, you still have to lead your team, and now you're also in due diligence, turning over financials, answering questions. Doing that without the right team around you is a recipe for disaster, and it's a big reason so many deals fall apart after the LOI. One of my favorite lines from Carl is this: an attractive business to buy is a fun business to run. And he gives you a dead simple test for it that every business owner should consider applying immediately. Let's get into it. Thanks, Carl, for coming in. I really appreciate it. I know I got a chance to meet you through Provisors. Might as well give Provisors a plug here to start this off. I just joined in November on recommendation from Jared Green, who's a mutual friend of ours, guy. And I've been really happy with it so far. So.
All right. Has he been on the podcast yet?
He has. He was guest number 2.
Good.
On the podcast. So
good.
Although I had lunch with him yesterday,
and
now that he's 6 months into his new firm, he and I were joking it'd be a very different podcast because when we shot it, I think he was maybe like a month or 2 in, and not that it was all sunshine and roses, but the different things that he's encountering now, right, versus where he was then was pretty fun.
Absolutely. And it's exciting to see when someone, pulls it all together and takes the risk to go out on their own. And that's exactly what Jared did. He was working for a couple different firms and then decided, all right, here we go. And that's really what a lot of your listeners are all about is, either having made the leap themselves already or, thinking about it maybe.
Right.
Yep. Into business ownership. It's an exciting ride, but not for the faint of heart.
No, not at all. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, like, the 30-second elevator pitch, and kind of set the stage for the listeners.
Sure, absolutely. So I guess I'll back up just really quickly to say I was third generation in our family business. We helped folks who were getting married or going to prom look their best, and so it was wedding and prom apparel. If some of your folks have heard of either Genghis Filmwear or Savvy Filmwear, that was our family. And
I think I might have got my prom tux from Savvy.
Oh, well, okay, great, awesome, thanks. And sorry if we made it uncomfortable. Yeah. They're not like wearing velvet. They're a little scratchy, but hopefully it was a good experience. Anyway, so we did that and bought our parents out so that they could have their retirement, and then eventually decided to sell. In our case, it was to a roll-up of 7 companies to private equity that we became the platform for. And that was really, really great experience. Learned a lot, and had also all along been teaching in the MBA programs at UGA. And so then people around me kind of were like, all right, well, what's next for you, right? So they were, thinking out loud with me, and many people just said, why aren't you helping other business owners do what you accomplished? And that's how I came to M&A. I don't know that I was out looking for it, and just kind of found me. And it's been a joy because it's a great vehicle to help business owners really get the most for the hard work that they put in. Business owners put in blood, sweat, and tears for years and years and years, and don't think much about how that is going to transition, right, to either new folks in the family or employees or an external party. And I like helping them, realize not just the dream of business ownership, but what they were really looking for out of it in the end, which was, a newfound wealth.
So super unique, interesting. So we were talking right before we started rolling about just winding path and a lot of different legs, right, to your story. Could you tell me a little bit about even before the family business, it's like you were a counselor, school counselor. Is that correct?
That is true.
Okay.
So I met my wife at the University of Chicago. We were both doing masters in clinical social work and had the opportunity to work in schools as both a counselor, social worker, and then an administrator. And so I come at this from a slightly interesting perspective because not only have I lived the experience of owning, operating, and then selling a company, but I also have the sort of training of dealing with the emotional component of it.
Yeah.
And
not for the faint of heart either.
it is not. It is not.
Work.
But it's interesting because the most important decisions in our life are easy for the people around us to see and sort out logically. But when you're the one who's in the middle of it, it's at the heart. It's an emotional decision. And so working with business owners through that stress, through the emotional questions of, is this what I really want? Understanding what gets in the way of realizing their dreams and helping them distinguish those things so that they can see them for what they are and then make a decision that trues up to their goals. That is all part of the training.
Gotcha. And so how long did you do, like, were you in the counselor administrator space before rejoining the family business?
Yeah, I served in schools for 7 years.
7 years, yeah.
It was good.
Mm-hmm. And then that was time for something new, or how did that come about? That transition?
That come about? Yeah. Well, this will be an interesting story, I guess. I took a look at, as in the student support services role that I was in, you end up working with a lot of different administrators. And in those 7 years, I had worked with 20 administrators.
Okay.
And at the end of that 7 years, of those 20, only 2 were married to their original spouse. And I just thought the odds are not very good here in this space. And as much as I love the students and I love the teachers and I love the parents, the politics of we're dealing with the board and those kinds of things got a little old, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And
it's
I
interesting.
could see why.
Sorry to cut you off, but I was thinking about, I've heard that before in like big time consulting firms, law firms, government, like CIA type FBI agency, but not in that scenario. I wouldn't have thought that necessarily that happens as far as like not being with your spouse and the time demands.
Yeah. So given that, I just decided to prioritize the marriage. At the same time, my family had been knocking on my door and saying we could really use your help.
Yeah.
So that's how we made the switch.
And so that was a move back to Atlanta, back home as well too. So so it was a big shift.
My parents were originally from Chicago. My wife's from Chicago, so it became a second home. But then that brought us back, and so back to Atlanta we are.
Okay, and that was how long ago?
That was in 2002.
Yeah, so this is home again now.
Home again now.
Very good. Did you grow up here in Atlanta?
I did, born and raised.
Okay.
One of the few. There's not too many of us.
Yeah, I'm one of them as well. I grew up more on the south side though, so Tyrone is the name of the place.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so you know Tyrone. Most people don't. I usually start with Peachtree City and then work backwards. But did you guys have a shop down there in Fayette County?
You know what? We didn't. However, we had a partnership with Glendalough Manor. So, and we knew the folks that,
Interesting. Very cool. So tell me a little bit about third generation business owner or of the family business, right? And then that decision to sell it. I mean, what was that like?
So for us, the decision was more on the logical side. There were a couple elements to it. So when I say third generation, that means that it was my cousin and I, right?
Okay.
Children of our parents, who were brother and sister, who bought our parents out. And in our case, we each had two children, and we went to them and could see from them that their interests in their sort of long-term careers were not in the business. So that was number one. And then two, what we realized is that we were a regional player in a industry that was becoming more and more, it was shrinking like in terms of geography. And so we needed to actually be national to be a serious player. So the question then became, well, are we going to invest a whole bunch to expand rapidly, or are we going to let somebody else make that investment? And we ultimately decided that letting somebody else make that investment was right for us. So that's how we made that decision. Was
that realization something that you guys came to on your own, or were there other people coming to you guys and saying that, hey, you're not growing rapidly enough? How did How did you guys start to figure that out?
I suppose that might be a little bit of my MBA, faculty sort of at work. At the heart, the course that I teach is a strategy course.
Okay.
And so really kind of looking at the macro environment and the industry just sort of started to come together. And that's the really great thing about having a business partner that you really trust, is that you can bounce these things off and not have all these conversations sit in your head.
Right.
And one of the hardest things about being a business owner is it's really lonely.
Hear that a
And
lot.
I think a lot of your audience can relate to that. I was blessed to have my cousin as my business partner and somebody that I trust implicitly and knew that there was nothing I couldn't say. And hopefully he felt the same way. And that gave us the space to just take these things that would otherwise be rolling around in our head and get them out, and then, get them up on the board or on the table and process them together.
How long from the genesis of that idea, like, hey, maybe we do need to look at selling, to actually, finalizing everything? What did that process look like?
In our case, it's about a year.
Okay.
One of the things that was that industry is it's a very small group, and how do I say this? While most of the owners of the businesses are men, they gossip a lot. And so we really had to be very careful about how we approached that. And what was really sort of exciting was that when we announced the sale had been closed, that was the first time anybody outside the 4 members of the family knew anything about it.
Wow.
And I say I'm proud of that, because it does take a lot to be tight-lipped. We understand that business owners are concerned about, what happens if my people find out? What happens if my clients find out? Right? Then, they might try to jump ship. And so we're very sensitive to that, because we've lived it firsthand.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you could elaborate on some of the drawbacks. I'm sure to you it's the drawbacks of people finding out too early, right? Because I'm sure to you it's very obvious, right? Because you've been there, done it, you do it all day, every day. But I'm just curious, like what you mentioned some, right, about your employees and clients, but if you could just elaborate a little bit more on what those
It's
potential
really
drawbacks
mainly
are.
those two. So if
Okay.
if it gets out in the world, and let me just say this: there are folks who approach this head on and tell their team that they're looking at an ownership transition. And so I don't want to say that that's a bad thing to do. I think the important thing is to understand what are this particular owner's priorities, so we can line up to what they want. In some cases, they bring a small group into their inner circle, and who they can trust to keep the secret, as it were, as the process is going. So a couple of things about risk. Number one, there's always the risk that it never happens, right? There are plenty of transactions that get partway through the process but die on the vine for various reasons. And that uncertainty, it can make people wonder, well, if it doesn't happen, then is my owner, really, do they have their heart in it anymore?
Right.
So there's that. The second thing is, the employees immediately wonder, I hear a lot about, staff getting cut after an acquisition. And while that's way overblown, it's fair for them to wonder, I don't know what it's going to be like to work for this new person, right? I've worked for this owner for however many years, and I love working for him or her. There is the concern of, will I lose my job, or will I like my new boss? And that often can have employees starting to think about looking to work with, put the resume out there, right? We'll see what my other options are. Might as well. And then when it comes to clients, customers, the question that they have when they hear that a business is for sale is, well, okay, will the quality be the same? Will they even be around to, finish the job that they start if this is a long-term project? Those kinds of things. So those are the risks at their core. And I think it's why I would say the majority of owners that we work with tend to be tight-lipped about their intention.
For the ones that like to meet it head on, what's a reason why somebody would do that?
I think one reason is they believe in transparency, and they think to themselves, I've always, told my team everything that's happening as it's happening, and this is no time to be different. Another reason is that it gives the team an opportunity to step up into either ownership or leadership in a new realm, because a new buyer coming in, if it's an external party, they're looking at these opportunities saying, well, that's great, but if I'm buying multiple companies, and many of them are, they're not looking at how they can also run them. They're looking at how they can empower people to run them.
Mhm.
So an owner who is open with their team helps their team understand, look, this is your opportunity to step up and shine and really make a lot of money as a result.
Mhm. How often does that happen? Or do you see that happening where they're transparent and then there's somebody internally that decides to step up?
I would say that those two things go hand in hand, because if they aren't, how do I say this? If they don't have the confidence that they can tell their team about what's happening, they probably also don't have the confidence that their team
Makes
is
sense.
going to be the right folks to take it to the next sort of level into the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. What there's this idea that I wanted to talk to you about and I think it was you might have said this on another podcast that you were on about preparing to sell your business even if you're not actually going to sell it. The analogy, I don't want to butcher it, so I'm just going to lob it up to you. But about keeping your car in good shape, right, and making sure that you enjoy it while you're in it, but also preserving that resale value for later. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. I kind of think of your business as not just any car, but like a really nice car, right? Or it could be a nice car, right? So what's interesting is that an attractive business to buy is a fun business to run. An attractive business to buy is a fun business to run. So that's also true of cars, right? Like, if you've got a really nice, well taken care of classic car, you can, you go out, ride around in it, and you feel a lot of pride. Maybe put the top down, feel the wind in your hair, like all that kind of stuff, right? It's fun while you are owning it and using it, and when you go to sell it, it has a lot of value. You have a lot of people who are even probably coming up to you, going, if you ever decide that you want to part ways with that beauty, give me a call, right?
Yep.
Well, the same thing is true with your business, right? The same business that is well run is the kind of a business that has good leadership in place. Where the owner is somebody who can take time off, right? One of the great measures is, can you go away for 3 weeks, set your phone aside, and really enjoy a vacation, knowing that not only your business is going to continue running, but they're going to continue to get new clients. If that can happen, then like, we could keep doing this for a long time.
Right.
That's the fun business to run. That same business in the eye of a potential buyer is very attractive. So what's cool about it is it gives the business owner options. They can sit there and say, this is great. I'm going to continue to empower my team and, go to work at 10 a.m. and, leave at noon for lunch, or, go for a round of golf and then, check in with a phone call, right? So all those things could happen. And they also could get to the point where they say, you know what, this has been great, and I'm ready to let somebody else know, take it to the next leg, and so we'll sell it to somebody else.
Do you guys that all sounds great in theory, and for people that have that, I think that's amazing. I feel like the reality is probably a lot of business owners don't have that, and it's a place that they should be striving to get towards. Do you guys help them do that? Right? So maybe somebody comes to you and they want to sell, and you're like, your car's dirty. Like it needs some maintenance.
It needs some maintenance. It needs an oil change, and then a little bit, maybe some body work, right? Yeah. So we don't do the consulting that helps people do the improvement, but what we do is we will do a valuation at the outset.
Okay.
Now, how does that help? Well, first of all, it helps a business owner understand what the market value of their business is. And sometimes people really don't know. Sometimes they are undervaluing it. Most often, they have a little bit of a grand notion about what its market value. So it helps to right size, the value, and put it in line with, okay, here's where I am. Here's what my expectation is, my goal. Now there's a gap, right? So while just creating that reality is important. The second part then is that that valuation helps identify the areas that if they are improved in the business will make a real difference in the value of the business. They'll also make it easier to run. Mm-hmm. We can do that and then make introductions to experts who are really good at making an impact in a short amount of time on those areas. And one of the things that I personally believe, and this is not right, this is just my sort of way of thinking about it, is that a general coach, right, a general business, there's nothing wrong with those folks at all, and they're very useful. But I believe that when you're going to work on your business towards an eventual sale, what you really want is experts in the areas of your business that are not optimized, because they're going to make a much faster impact than a generalist will. So one of the cool things,
not optimized. What do you mean by that?
Any area of the business that really is less than ideal.
Gotcha. Okay. Areas of the business. Okay.
Yeah. Any area of the business. Mm-hmm. So I say that to say that sometimes what stands out is that their financials aren't clean, right? And one business that we work with, they had a rough time understanding and communicating what was actually happening in the business from a financial perspective. And so the first thing that we did was we linked them up with a fractional CFO. And then she drove everything, knowing where they needed to get to with bottom line reporting. She drove everything else, garbage in, garbage out, and fixing the inputs into the financial mechanisms of the business. And then was able to help them turn things around and ultimately even switch CPAs. So that's one example, right? Mm-hmm. Another example might be that the issue is around sales and marketing, right? And we have a opportunity around the revenue, right? So then knowing folks who can help them drive marketing, drive sales, put together a sales organization, those kinds of things. So understanding where the gaps are, and then making direct connections. And as you can imagine, the person who is really good at fixing what is at the heart a revenue generation problem is very different than the person who at their core is great at helping fix the financial systems internally. Two totally different people.
I couldn't help but envisioning this sort of love it or list it type of scenario from like HGTV, and they go fix up a house. And does that happen where business owners, like, they get the house in order and they're like, actually I think I do want to keep this business and keep running it?
Yeah, it has happened where they go to work on it. In fact, it just happened recently. And I was so proud of this business owner because he went from and what's so, by the way, interesting about this is that I actually lost in all this, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't get to go work with him and help him do his deal. But I was so proud of him because, he had 4 years, he was pretty much absent from his business and sort of in the process of getting things ready, realized I'm not there yet, and I have an opportunity to make an impact and work with my people a little bit more. And so will we work together? Eventually, yes, I know we will. And he said that. But in the meantime, he's fulfilling his dream right now, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, that's cool. It's very cool. There's just a lot of talk about PE in general, right? And flooding the space. And so how do you guys help navigate that? What would you say to business owners that are getting calls, like, take every call, don't take them? What sort of just general advice would you guys give?
Yeah, so for folks who might not recognize the acronym PE, private equity, or some people refer to it as a PEG, private equity group. So private equity, yeah. And one of the things about private equity right now is that they are really looking for opportunities to invest. There's a lot of money sitting on the sideline looking for companies to buy. And so with that, they don't make money by letting the money sit in the sideline. Mm-hmm. And in fact, their investors will say, if you're not going to invest it for me, then give it back to me, right? So they have some amount of pressure to find good companies. And that's why you're seeing them out making these cold calls, cold emails. And by the way, they're good at making those emails and phone calls sound very personal, right? Oh, we've taken a look at your company and it looks very attractive and interesting to us. Oh, all they're trying to do is get you on the phone to find out whether or not they're worth your time or not, right? So, or that you're worth their time or not. So I think the first thing is to notice that they're doing that to everybody getting their hands on. And while they're wanting you to think it's special about you, unfortunately, it's not. That's the first thing to notice about private equity. Second thing to notice about private equity is that they're very, very friendly and they're disarming. And I don't mean this to be prejudiced, but I do say that you should be wary because their job is to put you at ease, make you feel comfortable, make you fall in love with them, make you believe their vision and their dream for your company. Behind the scenes the whole time, they've got a team of very smart MBAs looking for how are we going to justify that our initial offer for this business maybe doesn't stand up to scrutiny anymore. And so, whatever that initial number was, we're going to cut it down, and it's going to be 70%, 70 cents on that dollar, or 60. Or, maybe we'll keep it, but we're going to have a earn out for half of the money, meaning you have to work for 3 years and produce results you've never ever produced before in that time frame in order to earn the other half of the earn out. So those are the things that I'd really watch out for. So in answer to your question, do you take those calls? No, you take them, you put them into a folder in your inbox, called, deal opportunities, and you just save them. And then when you're ready, you call an advisor and you say, here are all the people who've been reaching out to me. I am now interested. Now here's where this turns out to be a significant difference, right? So imagine, first of all, when a business owner accepts an offer from a single private equity group or any other person who's buying companies, that is going to be no one puts their best foot forward at the outset, right? So the offer is going to be lower. 2, it's you who has no legal or accounting training in depth versus a massive team. It's David versus Goliath. 3, the major opportunity that gets missed is getting companies to bid over you. If you want to think about the right way to sell a company, it's creating, think of like a James Bond auction, right? Only in our version, nobody knows who's bidding against each other and nobody knows what their numbers are. So it's purely pushing people to really dig deep in I say private equity, to dig deep in their pockets and go their best route. I was recently talking to a private equity managing director, and he said, "Look, he's going to upset me if he hears this conversation, because he said I don't like to talk about this publicly. Oops, but the reality is when we know that a seller is being represented by an M&A advisor, we pay either a half turn or a whole turn more for that deal because we know we're getting a quality look. And we know that the process of selling the company is going to be a lot easier because the advisor is going to manage the emotions of the owner and make sure that they go all the way through the process. By the way, when I say a half turn or a full turn more, that means an extra multiple. So taking the deal from, say, 5x to 5.5 or 6x as an example.
And I'm assuming this is the case, but I just want to make sure to be clear, because I could see some listeners thinking, well, like, is the half turn or the full turn due in part because you need to get paid as well too, right? I mean, what part of that is made up in that extra amount?
Sure, we do get paid, but it really is them realizing that they're going to get a better company. And the other part of it is that they had to pay more because they were knowingly up against other private equity groups, other bidders, and this was a company worth going all the way for.
When you explain it like that, it seems like a no-brainer. Why do you think that business owners fall into this trap of, like, maybe they just speak to one group and they don't go seek out because they don't know, or they think they can do it on their own, or what do you see?
I think that one of the, and I'm going to out myself here. I actually sold the business that we sold on our own.
That way, yeah.
I can look back at that now, and I can see that we left money on the table.
Yeah.
Why did we do it? We did it, and I think this goes to your question, because, and a lot of owners think that, well, the hard part is finding the buyer. I found a buyer. And we especially thought that in our industry, we weren't going to have a whole bunch of people excited about that particular industry. And if we found one, that was a really good thing. I think a lot of business owners, at their heart, are just happy someone's willing to take this to, from them and move it forward. I think it comes down to the core that the misconception, and it was that for me, that the hard part is finding the buyer. That is just one little aspect of it. Unfortunately, statistically, half of all deals will fall apart after the LOI is signed, letter of intent is signed, during due diligence, and before the sale concludes. They fall apart and they never get done. Half. Another part of what the advisor does is make sure that we don't just have one deal that we have, but we have others waiting in the wings. So we have a plan B, C, and D ready to go if our initial signed buyer starts to get cold feet.
Yeah.
Or drags their feet, by the way, which is another thing. Sometimes we have to look at them and be like, it's time to, or
get off. Yep.
Yeah.
The two-part question. One, why 50% seems like a lot to me. This is all new to me, but what are some common reasons why? And then the second part, is there just a funny or a crazy story you can it was absolutely ridiculous that it fell apart because of this, but this is what happened. Do you have a story you can share?
These are really great. So one of the biggest reasons is that the seller in due diligence starts providing information that was disorganized and really slows down the process, and the buyer gets tired and realizes this is not the company I had hoped it was. Right? So they call it off. That's number one. Number two, that happens, and then the buyer says, we're going to retrade. That is code for lower our offer after we already told you this is what we were willing to pay. That then has the seller get upset and be like, well, no, that's not good for us. When you're working with an advisor, the work we do to prepare everything and get it ready is part and parcel of making sure that we're not going to end up with these unrealistic LOIs that then get retraded. So we're very proud about the fact that we don't retrade. A couple other things that one is a company that has a lot of 1099 workers. And I'm careful to say the word 1099 workers, not 1099 employees, because employees by definition are W-2.
Right. Yep.
A lot of business owners confuse those two and don't realize how much 1099s are a risk for buyers. And that I've seen that kill more than a few deals.
Why is that?
Well, for one, they're not a solidified part of the company and culture. And so it's easy for them to walk away. And so part of what's been helping the business be successful isn't a sure thing to move forward with the new owner. The other piece is that sometimes they're 1099 because they're missing elements that are needed in order to become a W-2. And as the company gets larger and has more public, even though private equity is by definition private, but more visible entities that are owning it, then that becomes a potential legal problem for those larger companies.
Because they're 1099, but they're functioning as an actual employee. And
exactly. So it could open itself to lawsuits.
Yeah, okay.
It could also open itself to the IRS and other agencies, Department of Labor, looking under there and, fining or wondering why there's missing paperwork like I-9s, and then, investigating further. And one of my the greatest people that worked with us. She was our CFO. Cheryl is her name. She really made sure that we had that buttoned up, because she said, when you have one government agency that sniffs under your lid and starts to find issues, it's like they have each other on speed dial. And all of a sudden, you get calls and letters from other agencies in the government. And so it wasn't just the Department of Revenue, now it's Department of Labor, and now it's, right, whatever. And so those are the kinds of things that you want to just
avoid like the plague.
Absolutely.
The second part of that question was can you share a story of just something wild that caused the deal to fall apart? Not common, but just kind of
wild
crazy.
That caused a deal. Well, here's a wild one. At the end of Q3, this company had posted an EBITDA, and so when we talk about a multiple, that's 5 or 6 times. It's times what? Times EBITDA most of the time, right? By the way, a lot of owners think it's a multiple of revenue. It's not. So sorry to burst the bubble, but that's from 20 years ago. Yeah. It's not. You're not going to see that anymore. Most of all, it's multiple of EBITDA, so earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is really just basically saying cash flow that you get from the business. So that's the multiple, right? And so this particular company, they went from an EBITDA of $1.5 million to the next quarter an EBITDA of $200,000. That was like, whoa, for everybody involved. Yeah. And that doesn't, give confidence that anything's going to go well going forward.
Can you share what happened? Or it's okay if you can't.
It's too fresh. It's literally obviously everything's off, right? Yeah. Everything is just on ice until they can figure out honestly what the cause of that was. Because in some cases, the business owner is kind of looking and going, oh wow, I don't even know how that happened.
Okay, cool. We spent a good amount of time talking about preparing and getting the business ready to sell. I want to transition a little bit to the emotional side of it. You talked about that in our opening about, like your background and how that's helped, but I want to see if you could talk a little bit about the work that you guys do to emotionally prepare business owners for sales.
So we do a lot of education. One of the things that sets us apart is we believe that business owners who are informed about how things work make better decisions about their future. So some of this sounds like I'm not answering your question because I'm talking about education. Well, it's interesting that those elements of just understanding how things work helps in and of itself business owners process it emotionally and brings them back to, okay, I get how I'm feeling about this. Let's distinguish that. Now let's set that aside for a second and break open, what the likely results are if we go down this path versus this path. The other thing is that this part is a soft skill that is hard to describe in this kind of an environment, but it is important to just be able to listen. Somehow or another, I guess through my training, I can hear things that a business owner isn't saying that are going on in the background. And then when I say to the business owner, I just want to check something out. Is it possible that this is part of what you're dealing with? I know you haven't said it. I'm just checking with you.
Is there an example you can share without betraying confidence?
I know. I'm trying to think if I can. If I can, I will.
Okay.
I don't have one off the tip of my tongue that I can. But is it possible that, and I know illustrations are helpful, so I apologize that I'm being a little bit vague about this, and then being able to say to them, okay, yes, or letting them determine on their own, yes, that is what's going on. And then now that it's sort of like taken out from the blind spot of the car, right, and put in front of their car, now they can decide how to address it. But when it's sitting in your blind spot, it's impacting you without you realizing it. And that's sort of the emotional work that we're talking about.
I guess kind of what's being conjured up for me is maybe like fears of what am I going to do after? What is this going to mean for my family? Like, there's kind of fears or blockers there that are preventing people from making a decision? Is that what you're describing?
Well, that certainly is part of it. So the number one reason why businesses don't transition is that they're dependent on the business owner, meaning that the business owner is doing all the work or a lot of the important work. One of the tests for that is, can you go on a 3-week vacation? And like we talked about before, that is oftentimes what prevents a sale. But part of what lands that up in the first place is a business owner thinking that, well, geez, if I'm not important, if I'm not needed anymore, then that's horrible for me, and that's not good for the business. The business needs me, right? And so helping them distinguish that, maybe this kind of goes back to your operating in the background and the blind spot, so that they can look and be like, all right, you know what? Just maybe Susan is a much better technical person than I am in this. Maybe she could do a better job of it than me. And what's interesting is that buyers, that's music to their ears. If a buyer asks a seller a question and says, hey, can you explain this to me about your business? Why is this happening? And the seller says, you know what? That is a great question. Let's ask Susan because she's closer to this problem than I am, and she can probably answer it better. That kind of answer makes the buyer realize that this seller doesn't just talk about empowering their employees, they really do it. And so these are the kinds of things that go into helping a business be really prepared for a transaction.
What are the common, I guess, emotional things that you see that come up that I guess either stop the thing from being sold, or even I guess maybe even after sales that are
So issues? The first one is stress and paralysis. It is like a second job, by the way, to sell your business, because in the middle, you can't take your foot off the gas pedal. You have to keep that business going. Buyers will not like if in the middle of due diligence, EBITDA, revenue drop. So you have to keep that going while still at the same time producing all of this, what is truly evidence about your business, that what you say about it and have said about it at the outset is true. That's what due diligence is. So you have to do both jobs. That causes stress, right? That stress can also come from the family in the middle of that time period. Sometimes family can be really super helpful around that. So those are, and working with them to sort of understand their role in supporting the owner who's selling. The other big component is helping them distinguish what is pulling me towards the finish line. So there has to be both a push and a pull. For most business owner, the push towards the sale, towards the finish line, is some version of, I'm a little tired. This is like, I've been doing this for 25 years and I'm a bit exhausted and it's time for me to relax. That's the push. Sometimes the push is also some version of, I recognize that I have taken this business as far as I can. This is kind of like what happened in our business. And what's required next is something that I can't give, whether it's capital or energy or expertise. It's something that I can't give. That's a push. You need both a push and a pull. The pull is something that has me dreaming about my future and looking forward to it. And I'm going to just say at the outset that golf and the beach does not count, because most business owners who had golf and beach as their, future dream state, 6 months realize that gets boring really fast. So there has to be some interest that they can derive meaning for from their life in order to get there. So we work with them to help them identify what that is going to be.
And if they can't, then it's not a good client potentially, or if
I've never had a client who can't identify that. It just takes time.
Gotcha. Okay.
And undistinguished, unidentified, that's when the push alone is not enough and the deal can die in due diligence, right? Sense. Because not only will the seller possibly pull the plug, but also possibly the buyer will look at that and be like, I don't feel the energy anymore.
Mm-hmm. Something I want to ask you about is because we've been talking a lot from the seller side,
Mm-hmm.
and I follow a lot of small business accounts on let's say Twitter, X, on X now, and you hear about this tidal wave of businesses and baby boomers that are going out of business and selling their business and closing doors, and so it seems like there's a trend of a lot of MBAs buying up small
Mm-hmm.
businesses,
Yep.
blue collar businesses. What advice would you give for people like that are looking to buy a business?
Okay. So first of all, I see it all the time.
Yeah.
I think one of the first things that I would say is there are so many analogies that you can make about buying and selling in businesses to the real estate market, right? For instance, you don't go pay for an appraisal on your house before you put it on the market, right? That happens later in the process. You go to a real estate agent who knows the market and will give you a free opinion of value and tell you what they think the house would sell for, right? That's one, right? Another is that a house that is spruced up and is attractive is going to fetch more interest than a house that isn't, right? And you're going to get a better price for it. Another is, and I'm just realizing that I've actually forgotten your original question, but I'm going to keep going with this for a second. The other is this whole notion of multiples. Oftentimes in the real estate market, we talk about price per square foot. Well, the same thing as a multiple for a business is the price per dollar earned, or multiple of EBITDA. It's really actually very, very similar. Okay, how did you ask the question originally?
The question was about, there's this growing trend of MBAs and college, maybe they're W-2 trying to get out of their job and going and buying these businesses, and here's
where all that was going. And that is that a buyer would be foolish to start looking for houses to buy if they didn't know how much money they could spend. Okay. So that money that they can spend is a function of two things. How much money do they have in their pocket today that they can put towards a down payment? And B, how much money do they have access to in a loan or in investments from other related parties, oftentimes friends and family, right? So the first thing I'd say is figure out what you can actually afford to buy. A lot of times when I'm talking to someone, they haven't done that math. And so their eyes get really big about a company that they're not going to be able to make happen. A great resource, by the way, for that is like an SBA banker. And if you don't know one, reach out to me and I'll help you connect you. But they can help you answer this question. They also can help you identify not just the expenses that go into buying the business, as in the check that is written to the seller, but also the advisors you have to pay along the way, and most importantly, the working capital. You can't just go into the business, pay the check to the seller, and think that everything is ready to go. You're going to have to put money into that business to grow it, to keep running it. And you can't just rely on the cash flow from the business to make that happen. Sometimes businesses are on the market because there has been a lack of investment in those businesses over the last couple of years. And they're going to take a little bit of work to get them running well again. And so being realistic about what it's going to take money-wise is important.
I think this is the right website. LoopNet, is that do people list businesses on that website? Are you familiar with it?
There are a few like that. Biz by Sell.
If they're like Biz by Sell or on LoopNet, that is probably like
LoopNet is more on the real estate side.
Okay, so the Biz by Sell is probably what I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
that if it's there, that it may not be.
Yeah, and I will tell you, if you're going to go that route, you better have a lot of patience because there's so much listed there. And I would say that by far and away, most of it is stuff that will never, ever get a transaction done because it is businesses that are not just underinvested, but very poorly performing. There are a lot of businesses on Biz by Sell where the business is not even producing solid cash flow. They might even have negative net profit. And then the business owner argues, well, but we're taking all this other money out, and so it's not really true. And I get that. but that is not an attractive business.
Right.
And starting at a disadvantage, I get you don't necessarily want to buy a business that's perfect, because you want to have upside for your improvement that you put into the business. But also starting with a business that is a major turnaround effort. If you're going to do that, you really better be good at working with distressed companies.
Mm-hmm. As we start to wrap up here, anything you want to, maybe trends or things that you want to leave people with, whether for buyers or for sellers?
Well, I think, this year I was just with two economists, one from the Fed and one from Blackstone, which is a large investor, right? And both of them in separate conversations said, what will characterize the year 2026 is uncertainty.
Again.
Here we go. And so I say that to say, for a couple of sizes, business owners, I think, are starting to realize that they can no longer wait for the macro environment, economic environment, to figure itself out. And they certainly can't wait for policymakers to stabilize everything, because that's not coming anytime soon. So if this is something that's of interest to you, there are plenty of transactions that are still happening, and it just takes a little bit more thought. But come to somebody like me, and an advisor who can help you sort this out and make a smart play. Do that. If you're a buyer, the same thing goes true. You should understand the risks, but don't get paralyzed by that. Too often, and in fact, out of every one, this is an important stat for both business sellers and buyers, out of every 100 people who say they're going to buy a business, only one will ever do it in their lifetime. From a seller's point of view, that means there is a lot of folks out there kicking tires. No prejudice, just means that you really have to get good at weeding out who is worth talking to, because it is a major time suck if you talk to everybody.
Right.
From the buyer's perspective, know that you need to work with someone who can help you identify, am I really capable of doing this? Do I really have what it takes to get this across the line? Because otherwise, I'm wasting a whole bunch of time and energy about something that I'm not going to finish. So I think that's an important thing for both sides to, deal with reality around.
Cool. This is probably the episode that I think I've learned the most in so far. I mean, the other guests have been great, but this is not an area that I knew a lot about. And so I really appreciate you coming and spending the time.
It's my pleasure. As you can tell, I kind of like talking about this stuff. And so if one of your listeners is trying to understand, okay, well, how does this apply to me and my situation? I'm looking to possibly have a transaction in the next year or two. What do I need to do to get ready? Then my information, I'm sure, will be posted along with the podcast. So please reach out to me. Okay. I really am here for that.
If you want to say, how can people find you? Whether it's if you want to share your email, we'll post it along with it. But if you want to just say out loud,
yeah, sure, absolutely. Look, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I do lots of different ed moments there that are helpful. But if you want to reach out to me, email is really great, and we can find a time to talk. And that's C Nicpon, Nicpon @mcreek. For Marsh Creek Advisors, mcreek.com.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you.
Thanks.